was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper and Heavy D up in the limousine, hanging pictures on my wall. Every Saturday, rap attack, Mr. Magic Molly Mall. I let my tape rock till my tape pop, smoking weed and bamboo, sipping on.
All right. What's up, Fantasyland? We're back with episode number 6 of the Fantasy Empire. Welcome to the show, and we're excited about this one. Should be a lot of fun. We've got another week under our belt. Offensive scoring remains down through 3 weeks, but at least we can celebrate the fact that there were fewer major injuries to the skill players we rely on to play the game. So that's the good news. We'll never get through a week with no injuries, but at least they were down this week. So the third belt, to really dial ourselves in and figure out what and who works. We can also start to identify, I think, a little bit what and who not working. So kind of the goal of the show this week. One person who's not working this week, who's unable to join us, so we're sorry about that. Chris and Matt, we're gonna try to make sense of it all regardless. So let's get there, and I think we'll start off like we're probably going to do, and each give our top observations. So Matt, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, real quick, Dan, check your thing. You're going in and out, but I'll kick it off here. There's no elite teams. That's the first takeaway I have. We have some teams we think might be elite, or could reach that upper echelon, but there really is right now no elite teams. There's a lot of mediocrity and some depressing teams. 2, the quarterback play continues to be woeful for the most part. I mean, Mahomes and Stroud are playing like Danny Dimes. Trevor Lawrence basically has the same career as Danny Dimes, but doesn't get the hate that Danny Dimes gets. So, I mean, that stuck out. Josh Allen, to me, you see the Bills hat, so maybe I'm biased, but somebody said it, and I totally agree. He's closer to Mahomes than anybody's closer to him as the second best quarterback. I know Lamar's got the MVPs, but I would take Allen over Lamar without hesitation. And lastly, with the quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson in his first 7 games is basically the same player as Josh Allen was in his first 7 games. The Colts possibly have the next Josh Allen, but you got to ride that roller coaster. I mean, he looks horrible on certain plays, like some of the worst passes you might ever see. But, this is a kid that is just like Allen, very raw. So I know everybody's jumping on takes. They might not age well in the future as the Josh Allen ones didn't as well. 3, the aging, ascending running backs are winning right now. They won the first quarter of, I break it down to 3 or 4 game quarters in real football and in fantasy throughout the year. Saquon is him. I faded him. That was not good. Thankfully, fading him, it's really not hurt me so far. Kamara still is impressing the hell out of me with the way he's running the ball and just everything. Like, he looks revitalized. Maybe that contract is something he really wants, whatever. Shout out to him. Aaron Jones, another guy. When healthy, he closed out last year. He's looked fantastic. Again, can he stay on the field? We're going to have to wait and see that. The other running back scenarios, real quick, I got 2 more. It's, Bijan is a bell cow. He's going to be fine. But I don't get where Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't get the love. Where he gets fewer touches and is not a bell cow, but basically has the same production as I almost said Saquon, excuse me, as what's his name? Bijan. Thank you. I lost that for a second. And lastly, on the Jets, I'm not freaking out. And I know people are saying, don't be worried. And I'm not saying to freak out, but you got to be a little concerned as Braylon Allen's production is going to increase, I think, a little each week. And this kid looks fantastic. Again, I'm not freaking out, but people are saying, don't be worried. I think you got to have a little concern on that. The wide receivers, Justin Jefferson probably should have just been 1-1, and that probably would have been easy there. What Neighbors is doing I mean, Danny Dimes again is not throwing good balls. He's just making insane catches. Like he's even covered, or like the sideline contested catches this guy's making is unreal. Rashee Rice looks like the new Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, and you got to hope he stays healthy. And lastly, the takeout is the tight end position is looking like a total mess. Kelsey looks washed. Andrews, I mean, they only threw the ball 15 times, had 15 pass attempts, but I don't know what's going on there. Laporta has become like a luxury piece. Now he's got a ankle injury, and even Kincaid isn't even running that many routes. So that's just something, you're going to have to find, either keep plugging them in or find other alternatives. But that's my 5 observations from this crazy kind of week.
Yeah, you covered a lot there, Matt. You got a lot in those 5 bullets. I'll jump into mine real quick here. Quarterback play was at an all-time worst on Sunday, especially early on in the 1 o'clock slate. It was so bad. The games are boring now. The games are slow. There's no offensive production. The quarterbacks, like Matt said, they're sinking everybody else along with them, taking the receivers down with them. Kurt Warner tweeted out yesterday that he was going over the film of all the quarterbacks, and he had to shut it off for the first time ever. That's how bad the quarterback position is. We had a little uptick in the 4 p.m. games for a little bit there. It looked like the 4 p.m.s might save us production-wise, but then they faded out too, in my opinion. And then the 8 o'clock game, Mahomes didn't live up to the hype again. We got bailed out last night with some good quarterback play with, Josh Allen and Burrow and Jaden Daniels putting up some really good numbers. So that kind of saved the week at the quarterback position. But as a whole, the quarterback position for fantasy right now is trash. That's the first thing. Speaking of games, bullet number 2 for me, I think this was the ideal setup, that week 3 had. I loved it. You start off with your Thursday night game. We had 7 games at 1 p.m. We rolled right into 5 4 p.m. games, and I love the doubleheader on Monday nights. I think it evens out the whole weekend. I wish the NFL could just take what they did this week and keep it going, because even at the bar, like the day never stopped. It was 8 hours of straight football till 8 o'clock at night and into the Sunday nighter. Let's keep that going. Don't go back to give me that 10 games at 1 p.m. and 3 at 4 p.m. bullshit. That was terrible. Bullet number 3, Maddie touched on him as well. Rashee Rice. If we were redrafting again right now and sitting down in Vegas at the draft table, Rashee Rice wouldn't make it past the middle of the first round. Top 3 or 4 wide receiver off the board going forward. Anybody that got Rashee Rice early in the 3rd round, those last 10 days of drafts, or late in the 2nd round even, they're sleeping really well at night, right now. Bullet 4, I was surprised going through my FAAB last week how many people gave up and threw the towel in on Cole Kmet at the tight end position. I was lucky enough to scoop him up in a handful of places. I get it, though. I understand, he was the missing link in the first couple of weeks. But Cole Kmet comes out this week, 10 catches, 97 yards on 11 targets. As soon as Keenan Allen looked like he was going to continue to miss some time here, Cole Kmet came into my plan. I tried to be aggressive and get him on some of my fantasy teams. It's funny that after 3 weeks of play now, 2 tight ends that everybody felt were, to fade them, with Cole Kmet and Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert, after his performance on Sunday, is tight end 1 after 3 weeks, and Cole Kmet is tight end 3. So again, to Maddie's point, that's how rough the tight end landscape is right now. That 2 guys had 1 big week and are tight ends 1 and 3. And then the last thing, I'll wrap it up with this: the King and Kyren. The demise of King Henry was a farce, and he looked really good this past Sunday. I think he's a top 6 fantasy running back this year. Rest of the way, he's in the right offense. People were jumping ship early, but not anymore. And the Kyren fade was not looking too good right now. He's a bell cow. He's getting all the touches, 31 fantasy points. I know that team is beat up, but he might be the guy that we all, regret fading. And it was a lot of us that faded Kyren Williams this year in the fantasy industry. So those are my observations after week 3. Dan, what do you got?
Yeah, I think those are good. And, just on the tight ends, I mean, Kmet was such a great play, especially after we found out that Keenan Allen was going to be out. That just made it so easy. So great call there. I want to talk a little bit about somebody who's not in Chicago anymore. That's Justin Fields. It's becoming more and more apparent that he was not the problem in Chicago, and he might be the solution in Pittsburgh. His sacks and interceptions are way down. He's only got a couple sacks, not throwing the ball away because he's in an offense that isn't forcing him to try to win games on his own. So I think he might be in just the right spot. I think he's probably going to hold off for Russell Wilson for a few more weeks, unless we start seeing bad Justin Fields rear his head. But I just don't think that's going to happen with that defense. I think that defense is going to kind of keep, the Steelers in games where Fields he can run a little bit more conservative offense. He can use his legs. He doesn't need to feel like he has to sit back there and wait for 5 seconds for somebody to come open. He can get rid of the ball on schedule a little bit more because he's not trying to win the game down, 15 points or whatever. Point number 2, I think the Titans offense is starting to look a little unplayable for fantasy. I had high hopes for them. There are still fantasy points coming out of there, but the targets are really starting to get spread widely. As DeAndre Hopkins gets healthy, it was really disconcerting to see how many targets were going to tight ends, not named Chig Okonkwo, and basically not going to any of the wide receivers yet. Calvin Ridley, 1.9 points on the week. Woof. That's tough. You can't have that out of a receiver you drafted that high. Until or unless they're consolidating their usage, I'm going to be wary of starting any of them. That includes the running backs because they're starting to rotate the running backs by drive rather than using them situationally. So if Tajay Spears is going to start getting like 40% of the drives on his own, that's going to make it a lot tougher to play Tony Pollard. So third off, I want to echo one thing Matt said. Malik Neighbors is him. When your wide receiver has a monster game and all he wants to talk about is a drop from last week, that's the kind of guy I want on my team. He's letting that drop burn and give him the fire that he needs. He's got talent dripping out of every pore. I mean, this is a guy you definitely want on your team. I tried to get Neighbors even more than I did. People were just snapping him up super early, and I wish I'd been one of those people who was going even earlier on him. And also to echo on one of Chris's points, Rashee Rice looks great. But I'll tell you what, Mahomes, I think, is going to be just a very, very average fantasy quarterback. Because the thing is with Mahomes, he is now not getting those big, giant, chunk plays or anything like that. We've got a good defense, so he doesn't need to go out and score 50 points anymore. That's a problem. The other problem is they're starting to do, all these 16, 17, 18 play drives, which are absolute clock killers. And he's not, a lot of that's coming through the running game. A lot of it is short passes to Rice, but that means fewer drives per game. So again, it just kind of limits the upside on Mahomes. Still a fantastic quarterback, still the first quarterback I'd take in real life. But yeah, he's fantasy wise, I'm afraid he's probably a little bit more middle of the pack than anything. And then finally, Darnell Mooney has, I think, everything falling into place for him to be 100% startable the rest of the way. He's out earning Kyle Pitts for targets. London is a wide receiver 1, but he's not an alpha. He's just good enough to take coverage away, and Cousins trusts him. So I'm very bullish on Mooney the rest of the way. I think he's a guy I'm going to be sticking into my lineups in a lot of places. All right. Anything on that, guys? Anything anybody wants to cover?
Yeah,
Well,
Dan, Mooney. Yeah, Mooney, Dan. what do you call it? We talked about him weeks ago, going into the season. I didn't understand his ADP he was going off the board around 130 to 150 overall. And in that offense, if Kyle Pitts didn't take a huge jump, Mooney was going to be that really nice PPR wide receiver that lands right now where he's been the last couple of weeks. Last week, he had almost 20 fantasy points. This week, he was at, I believe, like 15-ish. He's just a solid wide receiver too. And you had to follow the money on Darnell Mooney, giving him $13 million a year in a big time offense. Why were we not in on Darnell Mooney? And I think you saw that the last week in Vegas, people starting to realize it. And he started moving up an extra couple rounds where people were starting to take him in that 105, 115 range. So people woke up a little late to the Darnell Mooney party, but I have a ton of Mooney shares, and I will, going forward, get him in more lineups.
And real quick, because you guys mentioned Nicole Kmet, great pick by you, Chris. But going forward, say Keenan is back this week, how does that affect his production? That's
Matt, 100%. Matt, if Keenan Allen's on the field and the three of them are there, we probably see Cole Kmet go back to week 2 Cole Kmet. It was just strictly a play on if you take Keenan Allen or Rome Odunze out of this offense, then Cole Kmet could see more targets like he did this past week. So 100%. It's based on the other health of the three receivers. He'll be fourth in the pecking order behind those guys.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and also I forgot, I have one bonus point. I have to give my public apology to Nelson regarding James Cook. Nelson was high on James Cook. I was not very high on him. I just didn't like the fact that this was an offense that has typically used multiple running backs, and then you've got Josh Allen involved near the goal line. So I got to eat the crow on James Cook, but I'll definitely be awaiting my Aaron Jones apology from Nelson though, because that was a fade of his. So
and you both could get apologies from me, because those are two running backs that I was out on. I look back now, guys, I don't know why I was not so out on James Cook. I just, sometimes we just land in certain rounds and we have other preferences, whether it's at the running back or receiver position. James Cook is the guy for me that every week I'm watching these Bills games, and that's the one that irks me the most, because that would have set up perfectly. I talk about these past weeks how more than ever this year my strategy flipped to making sure I got one of those bell cow backs early on, and then I was just hammering receivers, right? So going back to the running back position in round 4 and grabbing a James Cook really wasn't my thing. It was more receivers. But this is what's killing me early on. I don't know what's killing you guys early on, but those are the guys: Kamara, Aaron Jones, James Cook, Derrick Henry now. These guys that Kyron Williams. I mean, we could go on. James Conner's had a couple good games. Not having a lot of these guys in my portfolio is killing me first 3 weeks here. Watching the other teams have these running backs and hit on the right receivers early are torpedoing these teams, are sending these teams to the stratosphere. I don't have them. It's hurting. I don't know where you guys stand on that.
For me, it's been, I've been fortunate because I'm looking at my record and my points, and I don't have pretty much all those running backs you mentioned. So I feel bullish. I know we're going to have some other questions later, but I feel bullish because my long-term plan is that these running backs, it's so hard for them to survive, especially the aging ones. So if that works out, if I hit on that, then that's the home run that I'm hoping to hit.
Gotcha. Yep, definitely. I've got kind of a mixed bag. I've got them in some places and not in others. So,
and I want to say this. Yeah, and I want to say this. I think it's a mix right now of those mid-round running backs that we just spoke about are hitting and putting up the good production. And if you waited a little longer and you landed on the Javonte Williams, the DeAndre Swifts, the Tony Pollard this past week, they're not giving you average games. They're sinking your team for the week with a 2 or a 4. Those are what we in fantasy here is what we are looking to avoid. You could give me a 12-point game, a 10-point game. I'm not going to run around and be all excited about these guys. They're not going to carry you. But when you have the base of the Barkleys or these wide receivers that are hits, that those are the guys you rely on to give you the 20 to 30 point fantasy weeks. You just can't have it even out or cancel each other out with these 2s and 3s in our lineups that we just see straight across the board on all fantasy teams. I'm seeing it every week. I got 3 guys in my lineups that are a 27, a 26, and a 22. I'm like, great. And then I look down and my tight end gives a 1 and my RB2 gives a 3. And it's like, oh, great. I'm at 120, 120 points for the week. And if your quarterback doesn't carry you for the week and give you a 25 plus and they sink you, well, now it's a disaster week, but you still feel like there's hope because you have 3 or 4 really solid contributors every week in your lineup. You just got to avoid those landmines of the 2s and 3s. So that's my frustration through 3 weeks. That's what I see, guys.
Yep, definitely. All right, we're going to pay some bills real quick here. We'll be right back.
DFS getting harder every year, but we're here to make it easier with the DFS Dominator because I know a lot of optimizers keep coming out. Oh, our optimizer. What about this optimizer? But that optimizer. Well, we have a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Dario, Billy, the award-winning projections at playerprofiler.com, and builds the best lineups for cash games that have both upside and stability because that's what you want. It's a couple clicks, boom, boom, boom. You get the best possible lineup for your cash games. But for tournaments, traditional optimizers don't work. That's why we have a Lineup Genius, which takes you through the process of building lineups the way they should be built. Which quarterbacks you want to be overweight on, then building stacks, then setting runbacks, then optimizing, and generating up to 150 lineups that you can easily import into DraftKings, into FanDuel. That's the DFS Dominator. It's only $45 a year, not a week, a year. Just go to Player Profiler, click on the DFS Dominator from the menu, and you won't be sorry.
All right, guys, we're back. So let's just talk a little bit about one of the hot topics from last week, the Chiefs running backs. Of course, everybody and their brother was speculating on is Steele worth it, not worth it, Kareem Hunt, all of that, Samaje Perine. We had some wild bidding on Wednesday night FAAB bids and in the tournament leagues for sure. And we've got our first data point on the Chiefs backfield. So I'm curious what everybody's thoughts are on what you saw and most importantly, what you expect to see going forward. Chris?
I thought the money was, crazy, but we expected that. We expected the, 250 plus to 500 bids on Carson Steele, all a mixed bag, right? Because of people dealing with injuries and trying to get someone that they knew were going to get touches and be on the field a lot, and who's hurt and banged up at the running back position, and people just trying to survive these early weeks until they get their healthy players back. I wasn't in on him. We said it, last week. He got 17 carries. He looked decent. I'm not going to hold that against him. He looked pretty good. I think it was a lot of empty calorie, yards though. 17 for 72. He didn't contribute much in the pass game. If he would have got in the red zone there, he got the ball on the 3-yard line a couple times. He got stopped short on the goal line. I think you can expect 10 to 13 fantasy points from him. And right now that's an RB2, So I'm looking back though, after 1 week, I'm glad I didn't spend the 300, 400, 500 on Carson Steele. I'm sticking with that. I'll save my money for a little bit down the road and hope for a better player off waivers. But, that's the way I see it. I think Perine will still keep getting more involved on third downs and play a little bit more. And we still have the Clyde Edwards-Helaire looming over our heads in a couple weeks. I don't know what's going to happen. He's dealing with that PTSD issue. We might not see Edwards-Helaire the whole year. But if he pops up at practice in 2 weeks when he's eligible, those $500 Steele bids are going to look real bad.
All right. I think kind of my main takeaway was probably Carson Steele was not worth all the money that people spent on him, because the thing is, you're only getting part of a Pacheco with Steele. You're getting the rushing production, but you're not getting the receiving production. People who have Steele can definitely hope for some touchdowns along the way, but which we didn't get last week, but are probably coming. One of the most important things I think I took away, and one of my fellow league mates pointed this out to me in a league I'm in that has a lot of really, really good fantasy players. Carson Steele leads all running backs in success rate. So even though he's a total 0 in the passing game, I'm not sure if the Chiefs are going to have reason to change. So, Steele may be there for a while. Chris, your thought on that?
Yeah, I just want to say, with the Carson Steele, I looked at it two ways. I went after, and Duke Viveros in our chat here said the same thing. He went after Jawan Jennings last week. I looked at it as like a Band-Aid early in the season, like I said, to overcome. And I would have rather spent the money, not as much, on Jawan Jennings than a Carson Steele to get through these next couple weeks. So, if you're the Cooper Kupp owner, the Debo owner, those guys that are banged up, you're getting them back at some point. But who's a better play for the next 2 or 3 weeks, that you could plug into your lineup at the flex spot? For me, it was Jawan Jennings. I knew it wouldn't spend as much as Steele. That's just the quick point I wanted to mention there, just like Duke said in the chat. Maddie, what do you got?
That's a good point.
For me,
Sorry, sir.
Yeah, for me, it was kind of simple. The winner was Kareem Hunt, I think. And I'm not even a Hunt guy, but I don't get why Andy Reid stopped throwing to the running backs. That was like one of his fortes. You got a guy in P. Ryan who caught 50 passes last year in Denver in a crowded backfield, led the NFL in yards per route run for running backs that were qualified for the season. So you had that. Teams want them to give Carson Steele 17, 18, 19 touches. That's what every NFL team wants Kansas City to do. I don't think this is the long-term play for them. As Dan mentioned earlier, he thinks, they're not going to do this. I kind of think the opposite. You heard Mahomes made comments. He's relying on his arm too much. He has to get his base right. For this team to eventually get where they want to go, it's got to be through the air. And you saw it early in the game when he tried getting Worthy on a deep touchdown. If he throws that sooner, it's 6. But he hesitated, and it got broken up. So, I mean, they're basically playing into – look, it's the first game without Pacheco. And so there's that. I still think P. Ryan, as Chris said, will evolve in this offense. When he became available, they jumped right on him. They could have signed Kareem Hunt at any time, and they didn't. But I think from the performance, Steele didn't look terrible, but he's basically, to me, going to be like a Gus Edwards where he needs to get in the end zone. And if he doesn't get in the end zone, So, and I just didn't get why P. Ryan wasn't more involved in catching passes. It just seems like if they're going to take away the deep stuff, somebody's got to be open. They can't cover everything. And that was like a staple for Andy Reid. And we've seen it with McKinnon, how he was. And this is a guy that's proven that he can do it. So, and on the Jawan Jennings, one of the points, friend of the pod, Scott Jenstad made, because I was looking at stuff where when Debo was out, Jennings really didn't have monster games. But he said the fact that Kittle was out was the most important thing there, because he runs a lot of like the tight end type of routes. And look, good for him, because this guy's been like a soldier to them. He got the contract. He deserves it. And he just went off. So just to piggyback on that. And I'm still bullish on the Kansas City pass game. We can get into that later.
That's interesting that you say that, Matt, honestly, because I'm very concerned about the Kansas City offense. I don't like what I saw. Dan brought up some great points in his observations. That's exactly what I'm seeing. Seeing the Chiefs go on a 17-play drive to start and follow that up with like a 13-play drive on their second drive. It's dink and dunk offense right now for the Chiefs. He's got, God forbid, like Rice got hurt, in that third, fourth quarter, whatever, when he laid on the ground. And I was like, oh my God, if Rice is really hurt, Mahomes is a QB2 or unplayable. It reminded me of last year. I owned Mahomes. I wanted to fade Mahomes last year completely. I wound up getting him in one big league late, and I regretted it all year because he was just terrible. Watching that offense, and they didn't have what we thought they would have this year. But still, it was just, you watch them now, you didn't sign up for this. I'd rather have Josh Allen than Pat Mahomes any day of the week right now with what he's doing, putting the team on his back. I hope you're right, Matt. I hope there's better days ahead with Mahomes here, but like your boy Worthy needs to step up and be a reliable number 2 here, or they got to go trade for a wide receiver or something, because it doesn't look like Kelsey's going to give much in this offense. Well, we didn't sign up for third or fourth round Mahomes and 21 to 25 fantasy point games. I know there's that tweet that, all around with. It's 16 out of the last 17 games for Mahomes. He hasn't been a QB1. Is that it's something like that? Facts are facts. I can't avoid it. Yeah, facts are facts. I can't defend Mahomes anymore. He needs to open up the offense. I got to see a 360 and 4 touchdown game here to make myself feel better, or else I'm getting nothing close to the investment on Mahomes in the third round.
Yeah, and just real quick, the reason I'm saying that I'm still bullish on them, they could easily be 0-3. Baltimore in the second half moved the ball on them. They could have easily lost that game. It was inches of a toe that changed that game. And week 2 was the pass interference. The game against Atlanta, forget the pass interference, which should have been called. They could be 0-3, but Atlanta continually moved the ball on them. I'm not as impressed with their defense as per se last season, when I thought they really had a lot. I think losing Snead really hurts them.
They lost Snead.
I mean, OJ McDuffie is playing really well, but I don't think they moved the ball on them. They made some horrible calls. That 4th and inches or whatever it was, and they did that toss to Bijan. That was, a horrible play. They were inside the 10 a couple of times, so that's why. I think this is the early part. This is the first quarter of the season.
Yeah. Listen, the first 3 weeks of every season, the last 3 or 4 years are wild and all over the place. Let's hope that it's just, the normal weird 3 weeks, and then things start going and getting a little more routine with some of these offenses that we bought in on.
Yep, definitely. So I want to talk a little bit about just kind of take a view from 30,000 feet on the fantasy football landscape. And this is something that came from Abib Agbatoga in a group chat that I'm in. He plays in it's actually the same group chat I was talking about earlier. We get a lot of really great fantasy guys in there. And by the way, make sure you check out Abib's show too, First and 15 on the Player Profiler Network. It's definitely a great show. He covers high stakes. He covers, and it's a really, really good show, and they cover a lot of pertinent topics. But, Abib was saying that it seems like week to week consistency is getting harder to find than ever. We've got like the Browns backfield. Nobody knows what's going on. The Cowboys backfield. Nobody knows what's going on from week to week. Titans receivers, JSN and Fant, bouncing back and forth on which one's getting used, or JSN and Lockett, however you want to call it. But do you guys think teams are using analytics to game plan more specifically for each opponent? And maybe even more importantly, with all this chaos going on, and it's just hard to see what's going to be happening. How can we find ways to benefit from that? And I'll start off with my thoughts. I think we definitely, in a situation like this, we have to lean hard into what's really working. Overall, I think offense should be dictating to defense. I think offense in general, is more likely to be able to control a game than a defense. There are very, very few defenses that can actually control games. But when offenses try to change who they are based on their opponent, they're really kind of letting the defense dictate, and that's not good. We want offenses that go out and they execute their game plan, really regardless of what the defense is doing. I think some teams that are doing that are like the Vikings, the Bills, the Lions. I think those are teams that are just going out there and they're doing what they do, and they don't worry about who they're playing against on defense so much. Specifically in fantasy, I think we want concentrated usage trees, so whether you're talking about the offense as a whole or just how the passes are being distributed or whatever, those are we want to start players when we have concentrated usage on their NFL team. The only time I'm leaning into a tree that's, usage tree that's kind of diverse is when I'm scouring the waiver wire for a spot starter. Then is a good time to look for, something where I can hopefully just get lucky, rather than, trying to get distracted by a one-off in a concentrated usage tree. Like when you see a player that normally isn't doing anything and all of a sudden, he's got 8 targets and grabs, 7 for 89 or something like that. If the usage is normally concentrated, you can't count on that. You shouldn't be chasing it. But when you're looking at offenses that are a little bit more diverse, then that's something you might want to chase because you've at least got a chance for a week or two. Matt, thoughts?
For me, I think season long has been matchup based for quite some time. Like I made some really bad picks. I took Chase Brown. I took Jalen Warren. They've been pretty much unplayable. Even Spears. Those are 3 guys that I took a lot of. But I was not interested in the Cowboys backfield. I was not interested in the Browns backfield, with the exception of Chubb when he fell, and I thought it was late enough to take that shot. So, I think the hardest part of this is, it is a lot of matchup based and stuff. Like J.K. Dobbins is the perfect example. He had 2 monster weeks, went into Pittsburgh this week in a tough matchup with his quarterback with a bad ankle. And he put up, 8.5 points. So, that's something where maybe you start another option because he wasn't like an early pick. So you could have had other choices to take there. Now, what came out of that game is he actually finally got almost like the utilization went really up. Like he's in that RB1 territory that you want to see. And I don't think Gus Edwards is the backup for the Chargers. I think the guy you'd want if something happens to Dobbins, whose leg could blow up at any point, would be Vidal. Excuse me. So, I think you have to make those tough decisions sometimes. And it's, what is the defense? Are you playing Washington? Yeah, you're going to start your receivers and stuff. Your number 1 receiver is probably going to go off. And is it a tough run defense? Is it an easy pass? You have these things sometimes have to make the sways. Obviously, you're not benching your studs, your early round picks. But I think that comes in and that carries a lot of weight, and it's hard to separate from that.
That's interesting that you said that, Matt, because that's kind of my point with matchups. And I've found that in the last couple of years, I get a little too cute with my lineups, right? I go to my bench and I say, oh, this, my wide receiver 6 has got a really good matchup this week. He's playing this crap, pass defense. It looks good on paper. My wide receiver 2 has got this really tough matchup. Let me make that switch. This is going to be brilliant. I'm going to catch it. And then what happens? My wide receiver 2 produces. That guy that I shouldn't have been in my lineup, my wide receiver 6, he bombs out in a good matchup. And I'm sitting there going, why the hell did I do that? And that's my point on this topic right here, Dan, is there's so much inconsistency right now, week to week. Look what just happened with Jameson Williams, right? The whole fantasy industry, we were all excited about Jameson Williams. The first 2 weeks, here we go. We have a start. And then I have him on a couple teams. I couldn't get him in my lineup the first 2 weeks. And then I said, oh, I got this great matchup. He's playing Arizona. He's the hot guy. Get him in, 1 point. Boom. Okay. Zamir White. Okay. He sat on my bench in a couple leagues the first 2 weeks, but we were all excited about getting Zamir White off our bench as our RB3 against this Carolina defense. He's going to finally have his breakout game. Crap. So my point of all this is, I'm no longer, and it's tough because every week we do it and I still do it. And I've been fighting it. It's the hardest thing I do. Fighting the urge to take your bench guys and bring them in. If you have a healthy starting lineup, there's a reason why we drafted these guys in round 3, round 4, round 5. Stick with your studs. Stick with your wide receiver 2, your wide receiver 3, your RB2. You're going to have a couple weeks that are duds. Everybody does. That's what we're looking at right now in fantasy. There's no consistency. Just set your lineup, keep it simple, and go forward, okay? Like all the people that took Deontay Johnson out of their lineups after the first 2 weeks, what happened? Same thing. So figure out who your top players are at each position, put them in, and my point to you, Matt, is I'm going the other way. I'm not looking at the matchups anymore. I'm starting my guys and riding or dying with them.
Real quick, just on that. Like I'm talking RB2. I think the RB2 is usually, unless you invested heavily, is somebody that you can move around. And as you said, your 6th wide receiver versus your 2nd. No, I agree. Start your studs. You start that 2nd receiver. It's that 4th receiver that's in your flex. That's where you play around with the matchups and stuff, and you can make those moves. Like I was saying with Dobbins. Dobbins was an 11th round pick. So you might have had somebody in the 7th round that was a better start for him this week. So I agree, start your studs, but I think the RB2, the flex spots, you got to be liberal and you got to be looking at the matchups there.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're saying is there's almost more art than science to picking your matchups, and Chris's point is, when you can stick with the science. Don't let the heart overcome the head, so to speak.
I think we get too cute, Dan. We totally think we're the smartest. Yeah, we think we're the smartest out there. And okay, I'm gonna bring this guy off my bench, and he's gonna get my 22-point game, and then I'll put him back on the bench. But I'm gonna get him in at the right time. And you know what? What I found is it blows up on me more times than not. And my starter's sitting on the bench having that game that I dreamed my bench guy would have.
There you go. All right. So let's talk about some things that we do trust. We've talked a lot about some things we don't trust, but because there is so much that's hard to trust from week to week. So what are some things that you trust, Matt? Give us some hope here.
I mean, honestly, I don't trust nothing right now. I mean, you can just
that's not how we want to start. That's the right answer. That was my answer.
You can look at fantasy. You can look at gambling. Look at these underdogs that are like 14-2 again. They're just, there really is are the Bills a dominant team? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Who did they beat? They beat Arizona. Who's a good team? The Dolphins. Look, they're not Tua out, but they whooped them before them. But the Dolphins haven't had a lead all year long before that. They played Jacksonville, and they destroyed Jacksonville. The Bills' next 3 games, at Baltimore, at Houston, at the Jets. We'll see what kind of team they are. And I'm a diehard Bills fan.
I think your Bills will be 3-3 in 6 after week 6, Matt.
And that's really possible. I don't know how the defense is doing it. Their 2 linebackers, Milano, Bernard, are out. Their best guy in the secondary, Taron Johnson, is out. So, I mean, what do I trust? I'm still going to trust that the Texans offense figures it out and is one of the better offenses in all of football. Now, what happened in that game? I'm starting to trust Minnesota. You have to. Look how dominant they've been. What did Minnesota do? They had this fantastic draft, great free agency. They took 2 key players from the Texans defense, signed them. They got DJ Turner. They even got in the secondary the guy from the Cowboys, Stephen Gilmore, to kind of shore that up. That's what I was really worried about. So, I mean, what do I trust? There's not a lot. I think the Chiefs are a smart enough organization. I trust Andy Reid, and I think the way they win and the way they become dominant again is through the air. So that's why I'm going back to that. But the Titans, the Texans, I'm not bailing ship on. I think this is roster, at least offensively, is still too good, and they'll make the adjustments.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, Matt, I agree. Football's crazy right now. You look no further than the Raiders going into Baltimore in week 2, winning that game, coming home, getting drubbed. Survivor leagues are wiped out. Gambling is a disaster. I've gotten my ass handed to me gambling the first couple weeks. I'm losing teasers. That San Francisco losing outright, with nobody on the right. Just I could go on and on. But, it's funny. I was having this conversation with a friend yesterday, and he was like, Chris, it's so true. Like, we can't even predict how these games are going to go in our brain, like game script wise, back to a Zamir White. Hey, Zamir White's going to get 20 plus carries because Raiders are going to be up 10, 14 points. None of these games are even playing out the way that we, envision them going in to set up a game script in our ways to make these fantasy decisions. So, that's a big part of all this. I guess it keeps it interesting, but a couple things I trust. I trust, again, the weekly advantage of the elite bell cow, and that's Breece Hall, Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, and Bijan, Breece, JT, and Saquon. Okay, those four. I think it's a huge advantage when you set your lineup every week going forward the rest of the year. I know Bijan only had 13, 14 fantasy points, but the work is there. All these guys, they're going to touch the ball 20 plus times. When you could get that running back in your lineup that's going to give you 25 fantasy points, 20 to 25, and have those blow up 30 plus games like a Barkley did, I think your other teams in the league better really be on point with their running backs and can't afford a 10 and a 3 in their lineups, or else my one running back bell cow will wipe you right off the map. So that's one thing. I believe that Malik Neighbors is a legit elite wide receiver 1 this year, right off the bat, rest of the way, top 8 guy. I believe that. And last thing I believe is, as long as Andy Dalton is the quarterback of the Panthers, and he should be going forward, that Deontay Johnson is a legit high-end wide receiver 2 rest of the season.
Adam Thielen being out is really going to help him too. He's probably going to get 20 targets this week.
And it might breathe some life into my Xavier Legette shares, guys. Don't, leave the light on for Xavier.
There you go. There you go. Well, I think it's interesting because I think all three of us, without talking beforehand, are kind of circling around some of the same topics. So, because mine's going to sound a little bit similar, but the one thing I want to say as far as what I trust and what I don't trust is when I see something and I understand why it's working, then I'm going to trust it until I'm given a reason not to trust it. When I see something and I don't understand how it's working or why it's working, then that's something I'm going to be a little bit more skeptical about, and there's a lot of things I see in the NFL that I still don't quite understand why it is that they're working or how it is that they're working. So I'm not trusting them, but I do trust the Vikings defense. I think the Vikings defense is the real deal. This is a defense that's gotten some. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts here. They've got some really nice pieces that they added, some under the radar guys, and it's all fitting well together. It's in a scheme that's working well together. Basically Brian Flores says, I wanted to go out and build a defense that was built to stop the Shanahan offense, Shanahan, McVay, because that's what's taking over the league. So he's looking for ways to stop that, and he's been doing a good job of it. I mean, you take a look at Houston, that's right off of that tree, and they just absolutely dismantled the Houston offense. So the Vikings defense looks for real to me, and I'm going to keep trusting them. And what that means is anywhere I can grab them, as a defensive unit to play, I'm, on my team, I'm going to do that. Anytime I have players going up against the Vikings defense, I'm going to think long and hard about, do I really want to start this guy unless he's one of my studs? Second thing I trust, I think the Red Rifle is going to save our Deontay Johnson shares, and I think he's going to make Hubbard and Brooks the best running backs that they can be. I think Dave Canales can cook with these ingredients, so and he's going to. So I really like what's going on in Carolina now that they've made that move that they needed to make so badly. And, Brooks, I think when he comes on, it may be a slow ramp up, but, I think this kid is really good. And so I'm looking forward to once Brooks hits. He was a guy that I took kind of where I thought I could afford to. and just wait on him. And I'm liking what I'm seeing, and I have a whole ton of Deontay Johnson, and so I'm very excited about what's hopefully about to happen here. And then I'm also with you guys on the Texans offense is going to be just fine. I think with Jacksonville, Buffalo, and New England as the next three opponents, Buffalo is going to press them, but Jacksonville and New England are just terrible pass defenses. I think Mixon's going to eat, and the passing offense is going to run through Nico and Diggs. So I like what I'm seeing in the Texans. I think they just ran into a buzzsaw with the Vikings.
Yeah, real quick, like what you said about Jonathan Brooks, just to piggyback on that, I think it was an underdog tweet or maybe a Hayden Hinch tweet. The real winner of that game was Jonathan Brooks. And, this is a team, again, I said it in the preseason, that they're going to fight every game because they won the one game last year. That's why they yanked their number one pick after 2 games. They couldn't lose the locker room anymore. They couldn't look this abysmal. So, Chuba, this week.
Don't forget about Chuba, guys.
You got to love him. I mean, I have him written down in the lineup as one of the guys. So
people drop Chuba. There was a couple big leagues that I'm in that Chuba was dropped last week.
Crazy.
So people are, jumping ship on a lot of guys off to slow starts. We see it every week. DeAndre Hopkins was dropped in an NFFC primetime last week. We'll be bidding on him this week. People just give up too quickly. You got to let the season settle in a little bit before making these harsh decisions. But yeah, I mean, Chuba Hubbard, as well as the whole Carolina offense, came back into our plans again here, guys.
Yeah,
right.
I mean,
go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just going to say, the only caveat I leave is I know last year he had the one start. He looked really good. He looked fantastic versus the Raiders. But, it is Andy Dalton. And, I'm hopeful because, like you said, I got a lot of Brooks and I need this offense to move with him there. But it's still, sometimes you see that surge, that one first game or two.
Sure. But you know what? It's the topic of our show today is the resurgence of these veteran quarterbacks. And you know what? These guys, they maybe start their career off in the wrong spot. Maybe they're overwhelmed, especially at the quarterback position. There's so much information to take in, so many new coverages to see, so many things that you see these guys, they fall, they go hold a clipboard for 4 or 5 years, then they come back. I was excited right off the bat, and I was getting some heat on Twitter with why you love Andy Dalton so much. He's a veteran. Listen, he's not Joe Montana. Mm-hmm. He's nothing special. He's going to turn into a pumpkin sooner or later. But Bryce Young was a deer in headlights out there. Give me the veteran quarterback under center. We're seeing it with Sam Darnold. We were seeing it with Derek Carr before this past week. But there's just some guys right now in the league that they're 8-10 years into the league, put the ball in their hands, they'll get the job done. They know what they're seeing out there. The game is slowed down for them. And Darnold and Dalton are the prime examples right now, and you got to ride them.
Yep, definitely. All right, we're going to be right back after this. And we are back. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about we've talked about things we think we trust. Let's talk about defenses that were of interest for the fantasy community. Which defenses are pass funnels? Which defenses are run funnels? What defenses do you want to no part of our players starting against? I want to hear what you guys think on this. Who are some defenses you're looking to go up against the pass, against the run, or just avoid? Chris, go ahead.
Let's start off defense that I'm looking for my running backs to go up against and to run against. The Colts run defense is atrocious. That's my top one. Also seeing that Dallas can be ran all over right now, even with Micah Parsons in there. Their D-line is soft, and Dallas is getting ran over. I'll leave it at that. Those two. I have a couple others, but I'm sure you guys want to jump in on that. Pass funnels. We saw a couple last night. Jacksonville is god-awful, and Washington. Those would be my top two right there. I want my receivers going up against those guys. The Lions secondary is a mess as well, guys. It looks like so far it'll be tough to run against the Lions, but you could definitely throw against them, which means great news for all of us because Lions game should be high scoring again, just like last year. And defenses I'm looking to avoid. I only have one, and that's the Steelers. I think that Steeler D is legit. They got Watt killing quarterbacks. Porter outside is legit. So that Steeler D through 3 weeks looks like the top unit to me. And I'll give you one more caveat to all this. If my wide receiver is up against Surtain, I'm just going to strongly consider fading and sitting my wide receiver. He's moving into that elite shutdown Darrell Revis type where if you're going up against him, he just shut down Evans again. I don't want any part of that dude. Garrett Wilson might be in for a long day again this week with the Jets facing them.
So we call that Surtain defeat.
That's not bad, Dan.
There we go. All right. I got to agree with Chris on everything he said there. The Jaguars definitely a pass funnel. The Patriots, I think, are also kind of a low-key pass funnel. They're giving up a lot of yards. They're not getting a lot of sacks. Saints a little bit low-key the same way, just because their offense has been running from ahead so far. I don't know if the Saints will continue to be, but they have been so far. Cowboys definitely a run funnel. I mean, basically Micah Parsons, you do not want pass rushing against you. You just want to run against him because that guy is terrible against the run. Another one that's a real big run funnel. We saw the Bengals last night. Yeah, they are really good against the pass. I don't think they looked as good last night, but the first couple games they looked pretty good against the pass, and not so good against the run. Another one of the ones I'm avoiding. I think the Vikings defense, even though they've been giving up a ton of pass yards, they've been getting the sacks, they've been getting the turnovers, and if that continues, you might be able to drive down the field on them a ways, but again, that sack or turnover is going to end up costing you points because you're not going to get those, those touchdowns. So that's one that I would typically avoid. And the Commanders, I'll start anybody against the Commanders pretty much. What do you got, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, the easy ones were Washington and Jacksonville for the pass. You're just loading up on that. The Colts, obviously, they almost gave up 500 yards in the first two games. Only the Bears' woeful offensive line and terrible play calling could, help them, which it did. And the Cowboys, the last three games at home, the Cowboys would always beat the, under 500 teams and always play really well at home. They've given up 48, 44, and 28 points. So things are really unraveling in Dallas. What's weird to me is passing yards allowed so far through 2 weeks. Baltimore is currently last. So, I mean, the Raiders, we saw, after the first 2 weeks, what's his name, had over 250 yards. He was the only guy to do that. So, I mean, Baltimore has been sneakily, you could say it was garbage time, and Dak got 24, 25 fantasy points in those last 10 minutes. Well, you've been able to move it there. The last five are Baltimore, Washington, Jacksonville, the Rams, and the Chiefs. So I don't think we had the Chiefs there. I don't think we had Baltimore there. So interesting enough there. So, play your matchups. Look at these things. I think you have to put some time into it. If you're so interested in drafting and doing all this stuff and research, this is part of it, right?
I think a low-key big winner last night watching that Cincinnati defense get torched was Burrow and Chase and Higgins going forward are going to be in a really good position fantasy-wise. I think that's a team that could play a lot of games in the 30s. And even during the broadcast, they said it. Lou Anarumo, who's an unbelievable defensive mind and defensive coach, he's done wonders in this league, said that they're just too thin and beat up right now on the defensive side. He doesn't have the horses like he did in past years. So as brilliant as he could scheme up a defense, that defense is in trouble both through the air and on the ground. They're just thin, and that might lead to the other side. When situations like that arise, I'm like, all right, what does that mean for me here? Burrow, Chase, Higgins, you're in for some nice days going forward with these guys playing in high scoring games.
It's the fantasy carnival. You get the bad defense along with a great offense, and on the same team, and you just want to start every player you can from that team. The Rams definitely fit in there for me too.
Yeah. The real quick on the Bengals, just because we talked about them, 0-3. They had the easy schedule. They lost to the Patriots. They lost at home to Washington. 2 terrible. They got another terrible last place team. They're going at Carolina. They're favored by 4.5. I mean, I don't know who's winning that game, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Red Rifle revenge game.
Yeah,
there you go.
I tweeted that out. And look, their win total got adjusted to 8.5. After this week versus Carolina, the next 13 games, 6 of them are versus the AFC North. And they never really play well against Cleveland. They got the Steelers. You got to hope that they're going to have these, like Chris said, they're going to be behind and they're just going to be chucking, because I think just on the NFL side of it, I don't see them winning a lot of games.
Yeah, I was shocked real quick on the gambling aspect. I got the Bengals after their week 1 loss versus the Patriots at plus money to miss the playoffs. I thought that stood out to me. I was like, this team isn't right. There's too much drama all off season. There's just, T. Higgins was still out. It was small. I think it was like plus 110 or plus 120, but to miss the playoffs, I don't know what Vegas was thinking with that one. I hit that one pretty hard. Now they're 0-3. I think they'll need a miracle to make the playoffs. It looks like a 5-win team to me.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty humorous that a lot of people were taking the Bengals again in Survivor. An 0-2 team against a 1-1 team. I mean, I know Washington is not the greatest team, but I don't know. I don't think I can take an 0-2 team no matter what in Survivor. They got to show me they can win first.
Yeah, but Dan, any other team you took that was favored probably lost too. That's the crazy part.
That's true. But how about Washington? They haven't punted in the last 2 weeks. They've scored on every possession. I know it was 7 field goals versus the Giants, but that's pretty amazing.
That's a fair point, and they've got a rookie quarterback who's just getting better. So, that's a team to watch.
He was up for that game. You heard him say how, Burrow was a legend at LSU, rightfully so. But after a while, it got tired, and he got a chance to go into Burrow's house. And that throw at the end was just amazing.
Oh, that was sick.
Real good.
No doubt.
They got to give Terry McLaurin 3 or 4 go balls every week with Jaden's arm. That's got to keep happening with Terry's speed. We were sitting here dying for the first couple of weeks as Terry McLaurin owners. I know I am a big one. Last night was great to see that touchdown late. Really saved the week for him. It was another slow first half of going, oh God, I think I landed on a round 3 or 4 bomb in Terry McLaurin in this offense. Last night, I slept a lot better after that fourth quarter from Terry McLaurin. And I think Jaden grows more. Each week he settles in a little more. They know they know that Terry McLaurin is the alpha in that offense, and they got to get him the ball. And I wish they would design some more plays for him to get the ball short and then work it out. He's one of those receivers you give 4 or 5 screens to every week. Make sure he's got nothing less than a 5 for 50 in the box score, even if you don't hit him deep. But I feel a lot better as a Terry McLaurin owner going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, so there's a player where the buy low window may have slammed shut last night. A lot of people were watching him, and so it's this one did not fly under the radar. It was out there for everybody to see, but I'm curious to know who the buy low players of the week are for you guys. I think we should all be able to put one out there at least. I'll throw mine out there. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is my buy low player. He's getting more snaps, more routes. He had a bad week 1. He had a bad week 3. So, even though he had a stellar week 2, I think, that he's still somebody you can probably acquire if you're in a trading league or something like that. And he's definitely somebody that I'm going to keep in my lineup, because I think the targets are going to come when they play a tougher schedule. They've got Detroit, San Francisco, Atlanta, and Buffalo coming up in 4 of the next 5 games. So I think they're going to need JSN. I think that he's going to get a lot of targets, and when he gets the targets, he converts them. So I'm all in on JSN still. Matt, what do you got?
I mean, for me, first off, I don't believe in the buy low. I think it's a fallacy because nobody is willing to trade for like what it would take. They think because somebody one of these guys had a couple of bad weeks, they can get him on the cheap, and So I just never really believed in that. But for me, I'm going to go to a guy who was a first rounder or a borderline first rounder in Garrett Wilson, as Chris mentioned earlier. He gets Patrick Surtain this week. He started off with L'Jarius Sneed. He had Christian Gonzalez. It opens up very nicely going forward. If you believe the Jets are going to be a playoff team, and if we get this version of Aaron Rodgers from Thursday night, I know it was the Patriots, but if we get this version, and Rodgers knows the path to this team being successful is going through Garrett Wilson. He's still getting all the routes. He threw a lot of targets to him. They just missed on a couple, out of bounds, overthrown. But I think Garrett Wilson going forward, this week's going to be a rough one. But after week 4, he's going to show you, and he's going to put up elite numbers going forward.
Yeah. Matt, you said it perfectly. That's a great one. If you heard Aaron Rodgers' post-game press conference last week, he said the first 3 games of the season so far, defenses have rolled coverage to Garrett Wilson. They have made it their priority to take him out of the game. Okay, he said that. He also, if you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, when they're on the 1 or 2 yard line right there, he force-fed Garrett Wilson a touchdown. He said, that's my guy. I can easily run this play in and give it to the running back to run it in here. But Wilson was having a slow game again. Let me get him, keep him happy, get him in the end zone, and he did that. Like you said, Surtain this week, it might be not the greatest September, but if there's one receiver that I'll bet on to be the wide receiver 1 from October 1st through the rest of the season, it'll be Garrett Wilson. He's going to have those monster blow-up wide receiver 1 weeks after this week. So you have the quarterback to get him the ball, and everything's just fine in Garrett Wilson land. It just hasn't been the greatest September that we hoped for out of a first-round pick. My buy low guy, with Jordan Love coming back under center in week 4, I assume that he was looking like he was almost ready to go. Let's see the return of Christian Watson into our starting lineups. It's been a complete horror show the first 3 weeks, obviously. I don't think any of us have had Christian Watson in our lineup the last couple weeks, but as long as we get the go-ahead here that Jordan Love is back and starting, I'm going to start putting Christian Watson back in my lineup and hope that, he gives us that wide receiver 2 production.
2 quick points. One that Joey Brown made in the comment section about Rodgers trying to really embarrass Peyton this weekend for what happened to Hackett's situation and the comments there. I can see the Jets maybe rolling up that score there. I don't know, but we'll see. It is a tough cornerback matchup. So, and Chris, who was your guy again? I'm sorry. I just
Christian Watson.
Christian Watson. They basically were able to rest Love that extra week because it was a non-conference game. And if they would have lost that game, it wouldn't have been great. It would have been 1-2, but it wouldn't have mattered as much as a conference game, especially with the Vikings coming up. So the Watsons, I mean, I wish I stayed on Jaden Reed. I have enough shares, but I wish I had more. And Watson, I think this whole offense is going to flourish once Love comes back.
And listen, as much as I'm scared, and we all are, of Patrick Surtain up against Wilson, there are plays where, they design these guys to get him away from Surtain. We've seen a couple weeks ago getting away from Surtain on some plays. And all you really need is a small handful of them. They could put Wilson in and out of the slot or whatever. And all you need is, a small handful of plays where Surtain isn't on him. Nobody else is scared of anybody else in that Denver defense up against Wilson. So he can definitely, we're definitely not saying to bench Garrett Wilson. I'm just saying the times that he's matched up against Patrick Surtain, Hopefully it's not 100% of the time or anything like that. But even if it's 80% of the time, Wilson can have a day on the other 20% of that. And to Wilson's and to Joey Brown's point with, the revenge game against Denver, I was looking ahead to the following week with Justin Jefferson, what he said about Garrett Wilson, that, hey, respectfully, I'm not Garrett Wilson. Well, guess what? The Jets play the Vikings in week 5, and don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to say, oh yeah, let me show you how great my guy is too, and put on a show for him. So listen, we're all in on Garrett Wilson going forward.
One quick
though
point.
Respectively, he is no Justin Jefferson.
No,
Justin Jefferson is right now.
That's true.
But just out of curiosity with this Denver team, I think you can run all over them. You saw Bucky Irvin when he got inserted. I mean, as good as a pass catcher as Rasheed White is, he's got to be one of the worst running backs when running the ball. So now, just a question: is Braylon Allen a standalone option this week versus Denver as an RB2, or a flex play? Say you need whatever.
That's going to blow up on some people that do that. Mm-hmm. You could see the writing on the wall. To me, he's the elite handcuff in football, in fantasy football right now, where Braylon Allen would be a top 6 RB1 if Breece Hall went down, in my opinion. But to play him standalone on the limited snaps, I'm under the impression, guys, that last Thursday Allen got more work because of the short week. Okay, I still think Breece Hall is going to get more carries, dominate more touches. I know he had 20, but I'm just saying, Braylon Allen came in on the second series last week in that game on Thursday night. I still think it'll be Breece Hall for the first 2. Braylon Allen comes in on the third drive. If Braylon Allen doesn't get things rolling in the third drive, what are you dealing with? A running back that gets 7-8 carries in that game as the backup? To me, it's tough to put him in your lineup unless you're really desperate right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a great point about using him on the short week. So something to keep in mind there.
Mm-hmm. That Jet team has a lot more weapons than I thought, guys. I know we're going to move on here, but I was so in on Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson in draft season because I was like, listen, this is one of those, Dan, you talked about like the concentrated offense. I was like, who else is going to touch the ball in this offense other than Hall Wilson? And now we're seeing early on, and maybe it's by design to open things up for the 2 studs in Hall and Wilson, but you're seeing Lazard get get fed. Mike Williams now all of a sudden came in and is looking pretty good. He's going to get some targets. And Ty Conklin with a 5 for 95 or 5 for 93 last week. He rose from the dead at the tight end position. So they have a nice little 3 other options here in the game besides Braylon Allen at the running back position. The Jets are set up nicely this year, and that's why I love them so much this year.
Between Ty Conklin and Mike Williams, I could have probably turned about 6 or 7 losses into wins had I played them instead of who I put instead of them. So, but it was just so tough to put them in when they were doing absolutely nothing. So, that's the way it goes. All right, let's get on a bold take. 3 weeks into the fantasy season, we can start making some bold predictions. And when we say bold predictions, I mean, guys, we're not talking about things that everybody's going to agree with. I think, probably when Chris and Matt and I say what we have to say here, there's a lot of you are going to be going, yeah, you're crazy. And that's fine, but that's what a bold take is. So, I'm curious to see what these guys have. Matt, why don't you lead us off? What do you got here?
I think a lot of people are going to say I'm crazy, but I think the elite quarterback, wide receiver heavy approach wins out. I know the running back bell cow is all the buzz after the first 3 weeks. Remember, it's a long season ahead, a bumpy ride. The NFL is chaos. Embrace it. And that's my bold take. I'm standing by it, and I think that wins out.
That's funny because I had said earlier in the show the opposite. So me and Matt are on different sides here. I think that this year more than ever that you're going to need the elite bell cow, right? And but to Matt, your point is you're saying that the mid round running backs are all gonna you're betting on them to fade out and die out, right?
I mean, pretty much. I'm betting against these guys, and I'm betting against guys like a Worthy, guys like a JSN emerging. So it's a combination of everything. And I believe in. I have the Brees, the Bijans, Gibbs, who I think deserves to be in a top tier conversation. The guy produces every week without getting the volume. So like I believe in that hero running back. Kenneth Walker was a guy I went heavily in on. Unfortunately, he's hurt. I don't know when the hell he's coming back, but I believe in having that hero running back. But I think in the end, I think Mahomes will be better. CJ Stroud has shit the bed this year so far, for the most part. These guys
Stroud
will
was
emerge.
good the first 2 weeks. I thought Stroud was solid the first 2 weeks. That's why we loved him going into week 3 and he shit the bed. So maybe we can't trust him as the elite top 4 that we thought maybe after the first couple of weeks. I gave him a pass week. Same way with Jalen Hurts.
Because of the Bears. I mean, the Bears secondary. Yeah. I gave him a pass week 2 because of the Bears secondary. And then they just abused him and it wasn't all his fault. You heard the what's his name that was on the team last year say they tried blocking me with a rookie tight end, and it was crazy. I mean, some of the things there was really no adjustment through that game. So that's my take on it.
The good news for CJ Stroud is he gets to face Jacksonville's secondary this week. So wheels up for Stroud and the rest of the stud wide receivers he's got with him. That's for sure. My bold take, I don't know how bold this will be, but I think Dak Prescott and Jake Ferguson both make runs at QB1 and tight end 1 overall this year. And I think we saw a little bit of a glimpse of why this past week. This defense is not good in Dallas. Similar to what we said with Cincinnati earlier, I think this team's going to be playing in a lot of high-scoring games. Dak doesn't have a run game to rely on. He's going to find himself in situations where he's playing from behind. It may not be real life, a great situation, but fantasy-wise, the way he came back and blew up versus Baltimore, and the numbers were there at the end of the day. There's not that many quarterbacks that are getting put in this position here with a bad defense. Like, what'd you call it, Dan? The merry-go-round?
Fantasy Carnival.
Fantasy Carnival. There you go, the Fantasy Carnival. And seeing Ferguson back out there, probably still not at 100%, maybe 80, 90% there. There's just going to be so many checkdowns to him. And with as bad as the tight end position landscape is, I just see Ferguson's going to catch 100 balls in this offense. And he's going to be what we all hoped when we drafted him, is that second option, after CD Lamb. They can't concentrate on him. Ferguson's going to have those really solid 8 for 80 and a touchdown type weeks. I don't know what other tight end is going to continuously give you that. So both of them combined, I think, can really be QB1 and tight end 1. That's my bold take.
Yeah, I especially like that on Ferguson. I think in a season full of wrong answers at tight end, he is probably going to be one of the few right answers. So like that a lot. All right, I'm going to go real deep here, but I think Bo Nix might be the quarterback too you never knew you needed. He's already got more points on the ground with his legs than Anthony Richardson. That's crazy. He's also a point guard quarterback who distributes the ball super well. He's playing in a system that fits him very well. I mean, Sean Payton knows what his limitations are, and he's working around those. And then the Broncos defense just isn't that good, so he's going to have to keep the pedal to the metal a little bit as well. I think Nix, first couple weeks looked pretty rough. He looked a lot better against Tampa. I think we're going to start to see Nix settle in a little bit, and as Peyton figures out what he does well and everything, I think he's a better quarterback than what most people think. And he's somebody that, if I don't really have a good answer at QB2, I'm probably just going to stack him onto the end of my squad here in the next couple of weeks and just watch and see what develops there. I like him a lot. Okay. So let's all, before we get out of here, let's each give kind of a must start lineup. Best bets for each position. You can go deep, you can go shallow, you can do whatever you want to do, but I want to get from you guys one quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end, if you will, that you think is going to have a really good week this week. So Chris, go ahead and lead us off here.
Yeah, let's get through this real quick here, guys. I love quarterback position. I'm going right back to my guy, Kyler Murray, this week versus that Washington secondary. I had high hopes for him this week versus Detroit. He fizzled a little bit after, the start of that game. Looked like we could have some fireworks, but it didn't work out that way. I'm going to hook him up at wide receiver with Marvin Harrison Jr. I think the two of them are going to go off this week versus Washington. That's one receiver. My other wide receiver, Nico Collins. He's the real deal. He'll get back in the end zone this week versus Jacksonville. At the running back position, we touched on it earlier. I think Breece Hall goes off this week versus that Denver run defense. One of those 28 rushes for 150 yards and a couple scores type games. And then I'll go with Maddie's boy, Jahmyr Gibbs, on Monday night versus Seattle in a game that I think will be pretty high scoring. You can see that playing as like a 28-24 type game. He'll catch a lot of balls out of the backfield. That'll be my my quarterback, running back, receivers. I'm going to go for the tight end narrative revenge game. Zach Ertz in a game where we just saw Washington, Arizona. That's going to be one game I'm focused in week 4, guys. I think that with the total around 50, Zach Ertz can rack up the catches here in a game where hopefully Washington's playing from behind. And Zach Ertz will be my under the radar tight end top play.
All right, makes sense.
Matt, what you got, buddy?
Yeah, I'm going with you,
Dan. Whoever.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm going with you on quarterback. I'm going to say Kyler Murray. I think that's a great call there. At running back, I'm going to try to give you one easy one and one that's a little bit deeper. I think Saquon versus a terrible Bucs defense is an absolute smash play. He's one of the things that's really working in Philly. And with the receivers banged up as they have been, I think they're going to be relying on Saquon even more than ever. My little bit deeper shot here, I like Devin Singletary at home versus those run funnel Cowboys. He should have had a second touchdown, but he wisely went down at the 1-yard line at the end of the game because he didn't want to give the ball back to the other team. So Singletary, I think, is looking really good. He's
good call.
Yeah, I like how he's looking. He's getting a big part of the offense. So he's something that's working, and I think will continue to work. At wide receiver, I'm right with you on Nico Collins. I think he's going to get right against the terrible Jags defense. And for wide receiver, a little bit deeper, I'm going to go with I'm going to go with my boy Jackson Smith-Njigba at Detroit. I think they're going to have to pass the ball. JSN is going to be needed by his team, and he's going to come through him for him. So I think I see a lot of receptions and a lot of yards. And then for
Dan, I love your team, man. I'm loving the JSN love. I'm loving the Barkley. Let's manifest these lineups and let's get it done this week.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then I honestly Ferguson was my guy at tight end this week. But I'll tell you what, if we have Keenan Allen out, I don't mind putting Kmet in. If we have more problems at wide receiver in Philadelphia, I think Dallas Goedert, could continue to eat there. So those are a couple lineup dependent ones, but lacking anything happening there, as far as like promoting those tight ends, I think I'd take Ferguson. What do you got, Maddie?
For me, I'm going CJ Stroud at the quarterback position. I think this is the get right game and all that. I had Saquon. It's the easiest one there. The Bucs, he's just getting too much volume. For running back, I had 2 guys for the spot. You said Singletary. I had him written down, so I'll say Chuba. Go Chuba at home versus the Bengals. We just saw that. Wide receiver, I'm going chalk here. Everybody's talking about Neighbors, and rightfully so. He's blowing up the world. CD Lamb, who puts up like a 40 burger this week, I think. I think it's coming. I mean, I think the writing's on the wall. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. because you got to play your number ones. I mean, your number ones versus Washington. But Deontay Johnson gets honorable mention with feeling going to miss some time here. And the tight end smash for me was like what Dan said. We didn't talk about it on the show. That was one of the vicious hits, penalties on Devonta Smith. And then the guy spit on him on top of it. He got hit both ways. That was just really horrific. But Dallas guarded. It seemed like there's nobody left. No A.J. Brown, maybe no Devonta Smith. So he's lined up there. And throw this one in. The Chiefs defense, if what's his name doesn't start at quarterback, it's going to look pretty good, I think, this weekend.
Speaking of the Chiefs, Derwin James is going to miss that game for the Chargers, and that's usually been Travis Kelce's kryptonite. I don't be shocked if Kelce arises from the dead here this week and drops one of those 7 for 80 and a touchdowns. At some point, Mahomes has got to get him going, get his boy going, or else you're going to start hearing Kelce start barking and getting some noise thrown his way. So that Kelce bounce back game is coming soon. I look for it this week versus the Chargers.
As Elvis said, it's now or never for Kelce.
Yep. There you go.
Yep.
There you go. Awesome, guys. A great show. We've been on almost for an hour and a half, so time to wrap it up here. But thanks to our audience. Thank you for tuning in. Check us out next Tuesday, 11 o'clock Eastern every week. Make sure if you haven't done it so far, hit on the way out, hit that like button and subscribe to the Player Profiler channel if you haven't. That way you never miss us. And if you're listening to the podcast, make sure you give us a like there as well. Give us 5 stars. Give us some good feedback. Whatever works. But those things help us get found and help more people tune in. So until then, good luck to all of our viewers and listeners, and let's go get it.